if you have to travel, be safe out there, but whether
It's trouble, John.
Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 17th, 2017, and this is a Moscow City Council meeting. Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. Would you please rise and join the Mayor and Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Walter. Before we get on to the consent agenda, we've got an approved agenda, amendment to the agenda, which will include an executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061C and 1F. That's the only change for this.
I move that we accept the what's it called? The additional amended agenda.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the amended agenda. I'll start the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, and we will move on to the new agenda, which is, the next thing will be the consent agenda.
I would move acceptance of the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Jim and a second by Art a motion by Art and a second by Jim to approve the consent agenda as is. I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
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 And aye.
Okay. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is staff recognition report. Gary, what do you have for us this evening, sir?
Sir.
We have a member of our water department. Tyler Palmer is here, our Deputy Director of Operations for Public Works, to make that presentation, along with Mike Parker, who is the Water and Sewer Manager. So, Tyler.
Good evening, Tyler.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thanks for having us. I had a full-length musical presentation set up for this, but Gary told me he'd smack me if I did it that way, so we decided to back it off a little bit. But no, we're here today to honor Eric Peterson with our water department. Eric has recently been advanced from an apprentice operator to a journeyman operator in our water department. Eric joined us a little less than a year ago. It's, I guess, coming up on a year here in the next couple weeks. Eric is a U of I grad, served in the Marine Corps, got into the water and wastewater industry in the year 2000 back in Vermont, and we were lucky enough to be able to hire him about a year ago. And Eric recently got his operator certification, a level 2 certification. It's really serious business what these guys deal with, and having the right people running our water department is absolutely critical. It's something that we all just take for granted, that when you turn on the water, one, it's going to be there, two, it's going to be clean and taken care of, and that's what these guys do day in and day out. And it's a heavy job, and it's not everybody who raises their hand and says I'll do it, but Eric's one of them that's accepted that charge, and we really appreciate him. He's just been a great presence in our water department. As Gary mentioned, we have Mike Parker, who's our water manager here, Eric's supervisor, and Eric are both here for the presentation as awarded tonight. And we thank the council for all their support of our employees as we try and get and keep employees just like Eric. So awesome. With that, we'll have Eric and Mike come up here, and we can a picture. Or?
I'll have to go get a camera, but that'll take me.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. Mike, you got a few words you want to say about Eric? I'd like both of you guys. We heard from Tyler. Eric, come on up here. Don't be bashful. Yeah, we're proud of you for getting these kind of awards. So, Mike, I thought I'd give you a chance to say a few words on Eric's behalf.
Thank you. If I choke, I'm sorry. No, Eric is a great asset to the city. He's been very good at volunteering for emergencies and things of that nature, never complaining, and just has a soldier's attitude with the water system, which is something that is just outstanding for me as a supervisor to have. When it comes to water quality, we take it very seriously. As people have health conditions. They can't handle contaminants in the water, and Eric is really good at making sure that we're chlorinating right, flushing right, getting everything done. He's taken on the valve exercising program for the city of Moscow, which is making sure that our valves are operational in case there's an emergency. We're not, having to shut down the entire city to try and fix a water leak. So his knowledge and ability to communicate and just work with computers is fantastic, as well as far as the spreadsheets and stuff. I'll be honest, and I told him tonight that I'm very proud of him for the achievements he's done here, but most of all that he applied for the City of Moscow's job, I think 3 times or more. So he never gave up on the city, and I don't want to give up on him. So.
Well, good, Eric. Let's listen to you for a few minutes. You got a few, and I don't ever ask employees to do this to try to embarrass them, but I'm always very, very proud of the achievements that our employees for the city of Moscow receive, and so I like to make a big deal out of it because it is a big deal for us, and this council up here feels the same way as I do, Eric. So.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor to serve the city, and like Mike said, I applied 3 times with the water department and twice with the sewer before they finally took a chance on me. And it's I've just been in love with this industry. You wouldn't think being a water operator is all that interesting, but it's as dynamic as can be. It requires mechanical skill, customer service skill, some stick-to-itness, and you're outside all day, which for me is just a pleasure. And Moscow's a city I love. I know when I've interviewed with these guys, I told them I don't ever plan to leave here, and this is the industry I want to be in. You guys got to let me in sooner or later. I'm going to keep coming until you do.
One of the things I love about people is they never ever give up, and that's a good thing. So I'm glad your persistence sure paid off for us, Eric. As well.
Thank you.
Well, without further ado, we can. Gary's got the camera. We can get a picture of you guys. That'd be awesome. I think this is great. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, these guys make me look good. Smile. Let's do one more. Is that a slimming photo? I look as good as Mike. Gary, is there any other staff recognition reports?
No, sir. That's all we have tonight.
And like I said earlier, and I'll repeat myself on this, I am always so very, very proud of our people here in our city when they get certifications and move our city forward, whether it's sanitation, water, or whatever. And it is a big deal for us. We take it for granted having clean, efficient water, and there's so many millions of people in this world that do not have that. So we're very, very fortunate that way. And so it's a big deal for us to have our people do these different things and get these certificates and awards. It's a big deal for us. Harry?
Your Honor, I'm sorry. I was going to mention once again that a bunch of press releases have gone out regarding potential flooding and what to do with your catch basins, those sorts of things. I'll mention that again at the end of the meeting. But it also leads me into congratulating and thanking again those people who keep our sidewalks and our streets clear. The street department, the Parks and Rec department, there are miles and miles of sidewalks that our facilities people take care of, shoveling snow off roofs and those sorts of things. That street department does a great job. Parks and Rec does a great job. It's getting a little ahead of them. I think with a little temperate weather, we'll get the job done. But I just want to thank them again for all the work that they do.
Well, we're certainly having a winter this year. We all know that. And so there's no doubt about it. Collectively, a lot of folks out there are helping, our city people. As you said, Gary, doing a wonderful job. But there's a lot of people just out there zooming around and next to tractors. I see it all the time going in. So neighbors are helping each other out. And then that's a big deal for us. And that's one of the things that makes this town so wonderful. So. Okay, I'll move on to the next thing, which is mayoral appointment, and I have 2 for council's consideration this evening. I've got Dave McGraw, who is a county commissioner for the Urban Renewal Agency expiration would be 12/31/2019 for his term, and Lorraine Sorensen for the Board of Adjustment term, which would expire 12/31/2019. And I would entertain a motion from somebody. John?
I would make that motion.
I'll go ahead and second it then. Well, I'm glad that didn't die for a lack of a second, so thank you very much. Okay, I got a motion by John and a second by Jim to approve these two names for appointments. I'll start to roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay. And either one, Lorraine is not here. I don't see her, and neither is Dave. So thank you very much for agreeing to do that. So now we will move on to the next item, which is public comment and mayor's response period. We limit this to 15 minutes, allow folks to get up and tell us what's on their minds, as long as it's not before the city council this evening or something that is before planning and zoning or the Board of Adjustments. And if you wish to speak, please give us your name and your address. And so please step forward. Anybody like to talk to us? Seeing nobody rush to the podium, I will go on to the next item. Thank you very much. Item number 5 is Lot 25, Block 4, Anderson, First Lot Division. We've got Ryan Cash who will present on this. Good evening, Ryan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. For those that don't know me, I'm Ryan Cash. I'm the newest addition to the Community Development Team as the Planner 1. So before you today, we have a lot division request for an unaddressed lot, 25, Block 4 at the Anderson First Edition. Here's the subject property from the street view located at the intersection of Sunnyside Avenue. And as you can see, it's currently an undeveloped parcel of land. Looking at it from the aerial perspective, starting at the beginning of Pearl Circle and the corner of Sunnyside Avenue, the property is located just north of West Palouse River Drive. The subject property's property line going in a counterclockwise motion. On the southeast parcel follows Sunnyside Avenue up to the north. Then to the north we have it adjacent to Fletcher as well as Sunnyside Avenue. And then to the west side of the parcel we have the western boundary adjoining to Anderson Park and back down to the intersection of Pearl and Sunnyside. Now, looking at the overall zoning on this particular parcel, you notice that there's two different zones that go across the parcel. To the north, we have R3, which is medium residential, and to the south, we have R4, slated as multifamily. The surrounding zoning uses, continuing to the south to Palouse River Drive, is R4 to the south, R4 to the east, and to the north and to the west sides of the property, adjacent to, is R1 or single family. Now, looking at the overall site plan again, the existing lot is 3.6 acres, or 160,881 square feet, and Mr. Lon Fletcher, the owner of the current parcel, has requested a lot split. So, let me go back there. So, Mr. Fletcher has filed for a lot division for 3.69 acre property divided into two parcels. The east parcel is a total area of 1.34 acres, and the west parcel is slated at 2.35 acres. Taking a look further into the zoning requirements for the R3, R4 zones, R3 are as follows. The minimum lot width is 20 feet for a townhome, 60 feet for single and two-family dwellings. The minimum lot area, 2,000 square feet for townhome dwellings, 5,000 square feet for single and two-family dwellings, and the max building height is 35 feet. For the R4, the minimum lot widths are for townhome dwellings 18 feet, single multifamily dwellings 50 feet, as well as the minimum lot area for the R4 for townhomes is 1,800 square feet, and single and multifamily dwellings are slated at 5,000 square feet. There are some rezone conditions on this site currently. In 1993, on July 12th, the City Council had a meeting regarding the subject property, which was rezoned from farm, ranch, and outdoor recreation to R3 and R4 with the following three conditions. Number one, the density shall be limited to 2,000 square feet per dwelling unit. Number two, the building shall be limited to one-story exclusive basements. And number 3, there shall be dedicated to the City of Moscow a pedestrian pathway minimum of 10 feet in width extending from Latah Care Center, which is now Gritman Rehab, to the Anderson Frontier Park. Staff's recommendations. This was reviewed and recommended for approval by the Public Works Finance Committee on January 9th. And staff's recommendation is for the approval of the lot division with no new conditions. At this point, I'd like to open it up to your discussion or questions.
Okay, questions for Ryan? Art?
Just one clarification. When it says recommend approval of the lot division with no conditions, does that exempt the 3 conditions that are currently?
No, sir. It would require a total rezone in order for that to qualify.
Yeah, I was going to say, those 2 different issues. You were talking about conditions on a rezone. This is a lot division, which has nothing to do with the rezone.
The rezone, these conditions are stipulated on this particular site, so this will follow that. The current proposal is to maintain those current rezone conditions.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we approve the lot division requested by Mr. Fletcher for Lot 25, Block 4 of the Anderson property.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the Lot 25, Block 4 Anderson first lot division. I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
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 And I.
Okay. Very good. We'll move on to the next thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ryan.
It's a pleasure meeting you.
Okay, item number 6, revised street tree planting program. David Schott will present this. Good evening, David.
Good evening. Bear with me real quick here.
Looks like, there we go. And then it should be right under this one if you close it. That's the one.
This one here. Thank you.
Well, maybe community development sabotage the Parks Department.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, thank you very much for having us tonight. This is the consideration of the revised street tree planting program. My name is David Schott, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. I'd also like to introduce Michael Ray with our Community Development Department, Assistant Community Development Director. We've really co-done this and kind of co-presenting tonight. So with that, I'm going to take you through a presentation. Start out with some of the benefits of trees, a little bit of background, an overview of our current street tree planting program, development of our revised street tree planting program, what those revisions are, our staff recommendation, and then we'll take questions. So what are the benefits of street trees? I think we all have in our mind what a street tree and benefits of trees really are. But the City of Moscow has been recognized as Tree City USA since 1994. We have a tree commission that works for the preservation, protection, and management of the community urban forest. The installation of street trees is intended to provide long-term benefits to the community. Trees produce oxygen, clean pollutants, filter water runoff, reduce noise, and provide shade. Summertime shade afforded by tree canopies reduces air conditioning costs by minimizing the need for air conditioning. It also mitigates some of the effects of heat islands, such as parking lots, that increase air temperature. Studies have shown that the presence of trees increase residential property values and encourages shoppers to linger in commercial districts. Street trees create a buffer between the street and sidewalk for pedestrian safety. They also create a sense of place, which adds to the aesthetics of our community. Moscow is a beautiful community, and I feel that's a large part because of our trees. Sheltering effect of trees slows rain, reduces runoff, and allows more water to be absorbed into our soils and into the aquifer. In Moscow's strategic plan, it identifies a long-term goal to increase the vitality of Moscow's tree canopy. It's also mentioned in our comprehensive plan and the implementation action of Section 142 to actively promote the expansion and maintenance of the city's urban forest, ensuring street trees are planted within all new subdivisions, increased planting requirements for landscapes within and adjacent to parking lots, the heat sink of parking lots, state highway corridors, and city entrances. Also, in our standards for street tree planting, to have adequate tree lawns for room for trees, so in commercial and residential districts, which may look a little different. I'd like to go back to 2012 and our citizen survey. In 2012, the Tree Commission asked respondents to identify the most important feature of a healthy urban forest for street and park trees. The number one response, respondents felt that increasing aesthetics and property values was important, about 30% of folks. Number two, 23% of respondents thought providing shade to sidewalks and sidewalks and streets was important, reducing the city's carbon footprint and enhancing stormwater retention. When we jump into 2014, the Tree Commission asked respondents to choose the most important feature of a healthy street tree population without the parks. Numbers are similar. The number one, 29% of people thought increasing aesthetics and property values was important, providing shade to sidewalks and streets, calming traffic, enhancing pedestrian safety, and mitigating the effects of climate change. They asked a second question. They asked respondents to rate their level of agreement with the statement, "I support the city's efforts to enhance street shade trees by," and this was strongly agree or agree. 72% of respondents either strongly agreed or agreed that developing a drought-tolerant shade street planting guide was important. Number two, with 70% of respondents requiring trees to be planted in all new construction sites. Working with neighborhoods with older trees to plan for companion planting of replacement trees, 68% strongly or strongly agreed. Identify locations where shade trees are missing and working with landowners to get them planted, and subsidizing the citizen cost for new trees to encourage shade tree planting at 58%. I want to jump back in time a little bit to the late 90s and early 2000s. The city, through a series of resolutions, established the Tree Planting Dedication Fund. This was done to increase street trees in new subdivisions. This is our current program. The developer is required to pay $100 per tree as allocated by the Parks and Recreation Department to the Tree Planting Dedication Fund based on the final plat. Community Development sends that over to Parks and Recreation. We allocate the trees according to our Board of Culture specifications and standards.
Excuse me, David. It was hard to kind of hear it through the background noise. So.
Absolutely. So the funds collected are deposited in the Tree Planting Dedication Fund under the Parks and Recreation Department, which can be distributed to homeowners to plant trees in the public right-of-way adjacent to their property in qualifying subdivisions. This is a voucher-based program. It only supplies, or it was intended to only the supplies of the trees, not the installation. So, to promote the program, we've historically had door hangers out there and tried to promote this program. To date, these are the results. So, right now, as of today, our percent utilization is 54%. I would note, these three subdivisions are largely being built. Peekaboo Estates hasn't had any homes built on it. Rolling Hills, as of this summer, only had 5 homes. You take out the gray, we're at about 65%. So our utilization rate's really 54% to about 65%. To increase that utilization, the Tree Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed our current program and utilization rates, and they discussed some options. Option 1 was to keep the existing program. Option 2 was required subdivision developers to plant the trees. And Option 3 was to require a contractor or homeowner to plant trees before the certificate of occupancy for individual homes. Both commissions reviewed the advantages and disadvantages and voted on Option 3. In addition, they created the Street Tree Advisory Committee, to gather stakeholder input. The committee consisted of a subdivision developer, contractor, an attorney, a citizen, planning and zoning commissioners, and a tree commission member. Research was also provided by our Community Development Department to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, indicating a lot of communities in Idaho require street trees to be planted prior to the issuance of a building permit or CO. Street Tree Advisory Committee recommended option 3 with the caveat they wanted to see an option for a security for full certificate of occupancy. Reason for this is there's some issues with bank financing, inability to plant trees during some times of year. Today's not a good day to plant trees, so there needed to be some flexibility. So based upon the Street Tree Advisory Committee, the Tree Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, staff proposed a revised street tree planting program. The revisions included street trees shall be required to be installed prior to the issuance of a building permit. Contractor submits plans to Community Development Department for a new principal structure or substantial improvement to an existing structure upon any lot or parcel or land within the city of Moscow. At this point, there's kind of two ways you can go. We broke it out into single and two-family dwellings prior to the issuance of the building permit or substantial improvement to single or two-family dwelling. The applicant will have 3 options. They can install the required street trees. They can enter into an agreement to require the installation of the street trees prior to the issuance of the final CO for the structure. Or they can furnish a financial security in the form acceptable to the city set by fee resolution each year, as adopted by council. For multifamily and commercial, this is a little different. As part of that process, they submit a landscape plan. This will be for any principal structure, substantial improvement. The landscape plan will identify the number, location, and type of street trees, and for approval by the Community Forestry Administrator, which is my office. Required street trees for such projects shall be installed prior to the CO for any multifamily or commercial principal structure. If it's requested the CO is issued prior to the installation of the required street trees, the applicant will furnish a financial security set by fee resolution, as I mentioned earlier. The financial security, if that option is chosen, it will be established within our fee resolution as adopted by council and shall be a form acceptable to the city. The Moscow Tree Commission considered this on December 6th of 2016 and recommended a financial security of $250 per tree. This is for the cost of the tree and the installation. I've been hearing the cost of the tree, the installation's anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 times the cost of the tree. So at $250, you could get a $100 tree, $150 for the installation. So, release of the security. It'll be released when the applicant or property owner within 60 days of inspection and approval by the Community Forestry Administrator. I would note that this can be planted by the applicant, property owner, or they can hire a contractor and pay them, and then the city would release that financial security. So, if the applicant does not install the required street trees for 24 months from the date of the CO for the principal structure, the city may utilize a security to pay the costs of installing the required street trees. Kind of where we're at, the staff sought feedback from the Administrative Committee on October 24th of 2016. The committee recommended proceeding with the proposed direction. The Tree Commission considered and recommended approval for the proposed changes on January 5th of this year. The City of Moscow Administrative Committee reviewed the proposed changes and recommended council approval last week. I would note we want to get some time to, if adopted, the revised street tree planting program won't go into effect until October 1. That will coincide with our new fiscal year and fee resolution. It'll also give us a chance to start getting the word out to some of our contractors on the program and do some public outreach. The staff recommendation is to adopt this revised street tree program resolution and approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules, requiring 3 complete separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. The action 1 would be approve the revised street tree program resolution, and 2, approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules, requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title, published by summary, or consider the ordinance a first reading, and that it be read by title, or reject the ordinance, or take such action as deemed appropriate. Excuse me. I would like to note there was a revision to the ordinance. I'd just like to mention it for the record. Under the draft ordinance, page 8 of 8, section 8-12, violation and penalties, there was a change. This is on page 71 of your packet. We're going to strike misdemeanor and insert the language violation of this chapter and subject to prosecution as set out in 8D, and scratch D, strike D completely, and re-letter E to D.
David, I got a comment I want to ask you. You had several times you said this ordinance would take, one thing that you brought up was if somebody had a substantial change in their property that's already existing, whatever substantial means, which I'm not sure what that is. So if somebody remodels their house and they have a contractor that's going to get a permit to remodel that house, whatever that may be, maybe they want to put a new kitchen in or update something within inside that house. By substantial, are you talking dollar amount or just exactly how substantial is substantial? I kind of like to know that question. Does that mean if somebody puts a new roof on their house that costs $10,000, is that substantial? And so that changes the dynamics of things. I'd like to know that comment. Mike, you got that? You're going to
grab it? Yeah, I was just going to mention in the definition section at the beginning of the ordinance, we have that inserted. So it defines what substantial improvement is. Pretty much 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction of the improvement. And then it has some additional requirements in there. So,
yeah, I wanted to make that clear. So if you had a $200,000 property, it'd have to be more than $100,000.
Correct.
With what you just.
Yeah, and that's consistent with our zoning code. So
Okay.
that would be the same definition there. So we'd be using the.
Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear so everybody knew what substantial means, because some substantial to some people may mean $2,000, depending on your income and where you're at in life. So I just wanted to clarify that. John?
Well, to clarify a little further, if someone were to have an older home and they decided that they were not going to change the exterior view at all, but they were going to completely redo the interior, and it would cost more than the value of the house as it sits, would that trip the lever? And all of a sudden they need more trees, even though they didn't change the exterior, only the interior, but to an extent that it costs more than half of the value of the existing piece of property.
Well, per the definition, I would say that it probably would, with reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure, the cost of which exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure at the start of construction.
But if the person already had several trees, based on what the ordinance reads, then that would suffice.
Yeah, usually in an older section of town, you're already going to have multiple trees out there in the tree lawn that are of old growth, and so the likelihood that you would be required to plant one is probably fairly low. But you're thinking of a, $100, $150 tree as opposed to a $100,000 remodel your house. You factor into that in the budget, and it's fairly minor.
I understand that. Walter?
Thank you, Mayor. Whichever. This is street trees. And the definition of street trees is?
Yeah, trees in the public right-of-way.
Okay.
So public tree, by definition, the city doesn't own those trees in the public right-of-way. The public owns those trees. the city's the stewards of those trees, so that would constitute a public tree.
If I may?
Go ahead, Walter.
If you would, go back to the change in the ordinance itself regarding the misdemeanor. I just now got to that page, and if you could do that again, please, I'd appreciate it.
Rod, would you like to explain that a little bit
Well, yes, Your Honor.
as well?
As the code gets changes, we talked about probably a year ago about the issue with the public defense system in the state of Idaho and the cost of appointing public defenders for misdemeanors, and we decided we were working on violations of our code to reduce the first-time offense normally to an infraction with a penalty, a second offense, an infraction with a higher penalty, and a third offense within 5 years becomes a misdemeanor. We used to have it as a default throughout the code if somebody violated any provisions of the code, unless it specifically said otherwise, is a misdemeanor. So we're working up with the code to make sure everything's not automatically a misdemeanor unless it's specifically told. This particular change is, we had this where we change it to the infraction schedule, first offense, second offense, and then a misdemeanor. It just didn't read right with a prior section there talked about a misdemeanor. These changes that David mentioned, stating it's a misdemeanor to say that it's a violation of this chapter and is subject to the prosecution as set out in Section D, which is just right below that. The current Section D needs to be stricken because it does no longer relate to the misdemeanor, and the new Section E will become the D.
I wish I had a legislative copy of what you're doing. It's a little hard to follow.
Okay, well, do you have? If you go to top of page 8 of 8 on that ordinance,
okay,
where it says be a misdemeanor,
right?
If you strike misdemeanor, and the rest of that paragraph, and put violation of this chapter and subject to prosecution as set out in Moscow City Code 5-8-12D, period. Section D will be completely stricken. Where it says E, that letter will become D, and everything else is what you have in the packet.
So if I may, go ahead. You had a conflict within this, as the way it was written, in that it said misdemeanor twice, and then it said it was a infraction.
Correct.
That plus the fact you wanted to clean it up and get misdemeanor out of there altogether.
Correct.
Okay. I think I'm okay with
Okay, all right. Even though, before we take any action on this is not a public hearing, but if there's anybody from the public that would like to comment on this, I'd like to have them come forward now and speak if they wish. Seeing nobody come forward, then I just wanted to make sure, because this is an organization. John?
Go with Gina.
Gina?
She had her hand up before I did.
I was kind of hiding my hand, though, so I was being subtle.
Don't be bashful.
Don't be bashful. I do have some questions. So what we just established with this conversation was that this actually goes from a misdemeanor to an infraction. Is that correct? Or the other way around?
No.
You're right.
I was looking for somebody to nod.
Right here, Rod.
The first offense, first violation of this chapter now will become an infraction with a $100 fine.
Okay.
A second offense within 5 years is still an infraction, but it's a $300 fine. And if somebody violates this chapter within 5 years, it's a misdemeanor.
Okay. Do we have? There were a couple other. If I can continue,
Go ahead.
please.
Go ahead, continue. You got the floor.
There were a couple different a tree planting guide or a tree guide. Do we have a suggested list for people? I mean, if they're all of a sudden they did this $100,000 remodel on their house and they find they need to do some sort of a tree, do we have guidelines of our own? Does the city have guidelines for that?
Yes, a couple documents. Great question. We've got the Board of Culture specifications and standards, and that's what my office evaluates trees and how many to plant and feet off the driveway. We also have a recommended street tree planting guide. The Moscow Tree Commission's in the process of revising that, but it's a very good document that's currently out there.
I think that's all for now.
John?
Thank you.
On the enforcement, Moscow has a lot of rules and regulations that are only enforced upon complaint by somebody. Is that what would happen in this particular case? Or would we have people out there looking and saying, you know, you didn't plant a tree?
Good question. Yeah, there is some enforcement to this. That's handled by my office. I do have an intern each summer, and and we try to get what we can out there. We're responsible for all city-owned trees and public right-of-way trees within the city, and we do what we can with our resources.
So we're going to be paying someone to go around looking at trees. Is that correct?
If that's what we want our intern to do for the season, go look for trees, yeah. But as part of this program, I'm going to spend some time making sure people are fulfilling the requirements.
Jim?
David, it would seem like it wouldn't be that onerous of a task to me because you know where the new construction is and you can go check if they've planted a tree or not, and it would only take a small amount of time. There's not that many houses, new constructions or remodels in a given year, are there? What would you say? How many new trees have to be planted in an average year in Moscow, Idaho?
Well, per this program, they would have to come in and either agree to plant the trees prior to certificate of occupancy. So on our final inspection, we'd go out there and let David know so we could go out there and take a look at the trees to make sure they're planted. And I'd imagine the majority of these are going to be accomplished via that route. If they choose in the middle of wintertime to go the financial security route, then they have pretty much up to 2 years in order to plant those. And then David has this list, and so he can go around and make sure, give them a phone call to say, hey, have you got the trees planted yet? If not, we're going to utilize that security and just have somebody go around and do it. So that's the way it'll be taken care of.
Also, I had a question for Rod. How many times would you say in an average year does anybody get charged with an infraction on something like this?
I think since I've been here 12 years, I think we prosecuted one business owner for violating the city code twice.
Thank you. So
Walter,
it's pretty trivial.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Catherine. I'll go to Walter.
Mine had to do with the fact that the people that, from the surveys, you know, the percentages that were given show a high regard for trees, and that the people that move into the neighborhoods kind of understand that they're moving into an area and they're going to continue to have their property look like their neighbors. They're not going to decide to put in like gravel, you know, necessarily. They understand that the tree is part of one of the reasons that they live here. And I think that the two surveys showed that from the participants that answered.
Walter?
Yeah, I've got a little problem with this because if you were telling me we had 30% compliance under the current process, I'd say it's not doing what it's trying to do. At 60%, it's relatively successful. A couple of questions. What is the procedure for, you get the tree in, they've satisfied the requirement. By the end of summer, it's burned up and died. Who's where?
Councilor State, good question. Our current code already has enforcement mechanisms. I can declare any dead tree, public right-of-way tree, public nuisance. That would trigger a courtesy letter from my office. Hey, your tree died. Please replace it. That letter would act as a permit to remove, and then there's also a requirement as part of that too. So, and that's already on the books.
So you and the intern are not only going to check to see if the tree got put in, you're going to monitor it to make sure it lives and thrives.
Yep.
For years.
Most trees.
Okay, I'm
sure.
I'm trying to understand what we're doing here.
Sure. Most trees are going to need some supplemental water, some care and maintenance the first couple of years after they're planted. After that, I've found in Moscow that trees tend to do pretty well. So, first couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing about it, they're going to have plenty of water this winter and spring. There's no doubt in my mind about that. That anything that's been established should clearly not die from lack of moisture. Walter, you got another question?
Let's remember the Palouse was grassland. It was not a tree area of forest that was cut down to plant wheat. I've got a question about the requirement that they can plant prior to the building permit. Why is that in there? I mean, the likelihood of that tree getting run over is just 100% almost in the construction of a new house, particularly.
It should say certificate of occupancy. Is that in the ordinance somewhere?
Go back to your three ways to do things, David, please. On the first one,
It does say street trees shall be required to be installed prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Permit.
That's what, that was not in that, that was just something in here. It wasn't in the, I didn't see it necessarily in the code, but I did read it.
the first sentence of the third bullet.
Yep.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think it's a Scribner's error. It should say certificate of occupancy.
Okay, so that building permit's not correct, the issuance of building?
Say CO.
Bill, you got a comment on that?
Your Honor, if I may clarify, so the street trees are shown in the city's standard construction drawings for public improvements required, and under the city code, technically, the trees are required to be installed prior to the issuance of building permit. The current program allows for that deposit to be provided, and that essentially satisfies the condition of completing the public improvements. So the city standard drawing that has the street section, the tree lawn, the trees are shown there, and the trees are technically a required public improvement underneath city code currently today. It's just that we've had a program that allows for that developer to provide that deposit, and that satisfied that condition. So technically, that is an option. If a developer wished to, when they built the road, plant the trees, they have satisfied the city code requirement, they've completed the public improvements, and that is really the trigger, is that's part of the public improvements that are required to be completed prior to the issuance of the permit. If a developer does not wish to do it before the building permit, then there's an option for the homeowner contractor to sign an agreement stating they'll plant it prior to the CO being issued, and if weather conditions prohibit that, then there's always the financial security to allow for the full certificate of occupancy to be issued. But just like any of the other public improvements, that prior to the issuance of a building permit, whether it's a street or a sidewalk or a curbing, it's part of that process. So if there are public improvements required in front of that property, then they have to provide a financial security for those improvements.
So if I may, so like the sidewalks that we now check at the time of certificate of occupancy to make sure that they haven't been broken up by the equipment building the house, or that they have to be put back. If they were broken up, the street trees will be confirmed as well.
Correct.
So this is written correctly.
That is written correctly.
John?
Well, I hate to drag this out, but I've got this big pine tree in my house, front of my house, and the last community forester said it's eventually going to go, probably going to tip over. And when it does, who knows what will happen. Hopefully it goes into the street. But is it then my responsibility as a homeowner to put another tree in?
Just a clarification question. Is this a public right-of-way tree or private property?
Oh, it's public right-of-way. It is right off the street.
If it fits within our arboriculture specifications and standards, if the tree came out, there'd be a permit to remove and then a replacement requirement that would fit those standards if applicable.
Start saving your money, John.
What's that?
Start saving your money.
Well, yeah. I didn't put it in.
Okay, well, there's two actions that's before us. We got a resolution, and then we got an ordinance, so.
Well, I would move to approve the revised street tree planting program resolution.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay, let's second that.
Okay, hang on a second. We got a motion by Art and a second by Jim on the approval of the revised street planting program resolution, and Gina had a question.
Sorry.
Right in the middle of the motion, so go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on your project or progress there. Existing businesses, the building's already built, they go in, do they then become responsible for the tree in the where it needs to be? according to our rules. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? What if somebody in Rodeo Drive moves into that space? Do they have to put a tree in if it's within our rules?
Is it
Or
a
in
vacant piece of property, or?
It would be, yeah. And they move in and they do whatever improvements they're going to do, and it ends up being within our bounds. Do they have to do a tree then as well? So are we going to end up having to go back and? My concern is existing businesses.
Point of clarification. Are you saying that some business moves into a vacant building that already exists? Or are you saying they buy a piece of vacant property and construct a building?
No, the first one. They move into a vacant building.
They'd be a tenant in the building.
They would be a tenant in that building, or potentially own part of it. That's beside the point. Are they going to be required then to do landscaping as well?
Well,
if
it
it's not
wouldn't
already
qualify
there?
as no, it wouldn't meet the substantial improvement standard, so no, they wouldn't be required.
Okay.
How about how about if they build a building? It was a vacant lot, and they put up a building.
They would be required to plant the required number of street trees.
It's already in the code.
Yeah.
It's already there.
Yeah. Okay, we got a motion by Art and a second by Jim to approve the revised street tree planting program resolution. I'll start with Walter.
An unenthusiastic aye.
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 No.
No.
Okay, well, it moves forward 4-2. Gina and John, the nays, the other 4 A's. Okay. Now we got action number 2.
Well, I would make a further motion to approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay. We got a motion by Art and a second by Catherine to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. I'll start with John.
No.
No.
Aye.
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 Okay, so that will pass 4-2 as well with John and Gina nays. With that, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David and Michael. We will move on to item number 7. FY
Your Honor, did you read the ordinance yet?
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Got so wrapped up in my thoughts. This ordinance is 2017-01, if I'm correct. The first one this year. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code, Title 5, Chapter 8, providing for the adoption of a revised street tree planting program, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 7, which is FY19 Local Highway Safety Improvement Program Grant Application. Elisa Anderson will present. Welcome, Elisa.
Good evening. I'm going to bring you guys up to date on this agenda item and also a little bit of history, and then Les is going to come up and he has a PowerPoint and is going to go over the technical aspects of the project for you. Back in November, we brought before you 3 applications that were to be submitted to the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council, and they were actually for 3 different projects. They totaled about $1.85 million. It was illumination on 3rd Street from Jackson to approximately Llewellyn, and then illumination on 6th Street from, I want to say, right, I know it wasn't, can't think of the name of the street. It was to Deacon from about where the URA property ends, I think it was, or right in there, where the Wells Fargo.
Allman,
yes, thank you. And then also the 6th Street turning lane, which was kind of our key project in that. At the time, all 3 of those projects met the requirements as we read the guidelines under the local highway safety improvement plan or program. And within that program, it said that you could use lighting improvements. There were actually assignments given to it in the cost-benefit analysis that you could do. And we submitted all three of those projects and actually had a visit with staff of the LTAC folks shortly before they had their board review and said that, our 6th and Jackson project had scored relatively high. And after the board meeting, we got a call from them, and they shared with us that our 6th and Jackson project was within the list of projects that they would be recommending to the ITD board for approval. However, the Federal Highways people that reviewed applications with them had said that lighting improvements, if you were replacing or adding to existing lighting, wasn't eligible. That was not made clear. We had never applied for something like that in the past, and it was an anomaly to them also. They had done some other projects, but they were only new lighting, and so they had never ran across this program or this problem. So they told us the other two applications for the illumination on 3rd Street and 6th and Jackson, on 6th Street, were not eligible. However, they did share with us there was some ways to kind of get around that. At that time, we didn't have that discussion. They invited us back to submit the 6th and Jackson application in the next round, which is what we're presenting to you tonight, but a separate project, because it would not have been able to be built until FY 19 or 20, and that would be too late for us to move forward with the 6th and Jackson turning lane project with the developments going on in that area for the URA. So, we weren't happy about not having any of those projects funded. It was the first time they had seen ITD actually rearrange their recommendation list, and this was for that huge pot of one-time funding under the LSIP that they had, and they shared that there were some a bit of changes made by the ITD board at the time when the list was submitted to them during the meeting. So not something that normally happens, however, it did on this occasion, just when we happen to have our projects in there. So, however, we have received our fair share, and that, is a good way to look at it. So, we were not able then to get a phone call with them to discuss another project until the 11th of January. And so that is why you're seeing this come before you tonight rather than going to committee first. So last Wednesday, we spoke with the leadership there who reviews the applications at LTAC, and we went over the project that you have before you tonight and talked about how it can be structured so that we can include lighting and also the other safety improvements based upon the existing crashes and all the requirements that they put in place, and submit it with the cost-benefit analysis based upon the data that we have regarding accidents, pedestrian accidents, those types of things. So in looking at the corridor, they also shared with us that we could submit 2 projects in one funding round. They will only award one. However, if there's a chance that something falls out of the queue or no other entities within our district were to apply, they could possibly fund 2. So in your CCSR that we submitted to you, we talked about an $800,000 project. With the further analysis of staff, and Les will go over this with you in his PowerPoint, we've broken it into 2 separate projects, a Phase 1 and a Phase 2. And an adjustment or a modification that we need to make to the CCSR is that the projects total $805,000. So our request tonight to you would be to submit 2 projects with a total of $805,000 maximum project costs. That would bring the city match at 7.34% to $59,087. And as I said, Les is going to go over those, but to break it down, the Phase 1 project, which would be from State Highway 8 or Jackson to 155 feet east of Lilly, will be $477,000. And then the Phase 2 project will be $328,000, and it will be from Llewellyn to 155 feet east of Lilly. So that's a total of $805,000. And I think, let me just check my notes here to make sure I shared with you everything I wanted to. If we were awarded this project, design would happen in FY19 and construction in FY20. And if we were awarded both, we can roll that second application into the next round. Automatically it gets submitted, but we'll resubmit if we aren't funded both. There's a possibility that we could design and build together based upon how the funding rolls, even though they may not be approved in the same year. So it could happen. It would be better if they were approved in the same year. Possibly if they were awarded, we could make the choice to build them in the same year and do design in separate years. So there's some alternatives to this, but I think it's a very good approach. Individually, combined, it's too large of a project to submit. Based upon the cost-benefit analysis, the ratios would not work out. So in order to be within the parameters, they don't tell us there's a maximum project cost amount, but we look back at the history of what's been funded and what the cost-benefit analysis says, and it's too large as one project. So I'll go ahead and let Les go over the
Before
technical. Yes.
Les goes over that,
Mhm.
Walter had a question, I think, for
Yes.
Lisa. Somebody asked.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, Lisa, I think I'm lost. We previously submitted a package of 3 projects.
Yes.
They liked the 6th and Jackson. But they said no at the federal level to the lighting on 6th. And they said what on the 3rd Street project?
They said no to the illumination only because we worded it as replacement.
Okay. Now we're turning around and going to do 3rd Street in 2 pieces because the one piece has been deemed too large, and it includes lighting.
New lighting.
It has lighting.
This is
I don't know the
technical
difference.
aspect.
Let me jump into that one, because we get into the scope of the project a little bit. Maybe I can answer your question. So the where did the mouse go? There it is. It's hiding. Okay. The project, as Elisa has indicated, is along the 3rd Street corridor, and this map's a little bit large scale to pick it all out, and we'll zoom in a bit. But just to help orient you a little bit, this is the 3rd Street corridor running from the Jackson Street area out to the Llewellyn intersection. It is broken into 2 phases, as she indicated, so these black boxes show the outline of those phases. The first one being the easterly portion and then continuing on to the west. So we'll zoom in a bit and talk about these and what's in the projects. So first phase really starts at the Jackson corridor, Jackson Street intersection. This is the old gas station site, so now we have that shiny new cafe going in there.
Looks like the bus.
Yeah, and the bus parked there in that particular photo. That's true, right there. The extent of the work would start at that intersection and work its way over past Asbury and really to the alley. That's at the western edge here. It's a combination of sidewalk and curb installation and new lighting installations where there is currently not lighting. And to help point that out a little bit, we'll zoom in a little further. So this is the east end of the job. So again, Jackson's right here. There is new sidewalk that would be constructed. This is kind of this purple here that you see on the south and north sides. So all new sidewalk with some new curbing in those areas. This is shown as previously installed, but that is the work that's going on right now with the new restaurant happening. This is existing and would not be changed on the north side. So new sidewalks and new curb lines along here. These blue symbols here represent where new lights would go in, and we'd be using the vintage-style LED lights that we have on College and in front of the MSI property on Jackson, so of that nature. Now, we have existing lights, like this red one right here, that would not be part of the project. So that's how you get around the replacement aspect that Elisa
Would they
referred
stay in
to.
place?
They would likely not stay in place, but they would be something that we would need to fund ourselves and to be constructed at the same time as the project. That's the concept.
To take them out?
To take them out, put in the same style of lights, but it would be funded purely through city money rather than through the grant for that portion of the work.
Okay, Walter,
If
go
I may,
ahead.
take them out and replace them as well? So the stylistic lights, or whatever we call them, would go in place of the two red,
Here and here.
3, 4, I guess I see 4, 1, 2,
One
3,
there.
4.
Right, in this section.
So those,
Yeah, that's
those
the thought.
those 4 reds out of our nickel, not project money,
Correct.
would be taken out but replaced with the stylistic lights.
Yes.
They
That's
would
the idea.
match the other ones.
It matches the 4 blue ones you're going to get in.
Yeah,
within
so the concept here is we're applying for a grant to fund what is an eligible expense. So that would
Okay.
be the curbs, the sidewalks, and those areas, those lights that are not replacements, just new. The project, when we construct it, what we'd propose is to then include those non-eligible lights, but those would then be funded by city funds rather than through the grant.
Which
But
is in
constructed
addition
at
to the
same time.
7% match requirement.
That is correct. So we would have the added cost of those replacement lights that would go along the corridor. The lights that are out there today, those that are shown in red, are just the traditional Cobra head metal arm off of a wooden pole, typical Vista-style lights that we have throughout the community. So we would want to replace those with the vintage-style lights, just like the rest of the new lights that are being installed as part of the grant funding. So that's how that would work in terms of the grant money versus city money to end up with a complete corridor, sidewalks, and vintage lights throughout.
Okay, John's got a question.
Change gears here a little bit. This will reduce the number of locations where vehicles are allowed to enter Third Street driveways. How many of those are there, Les? Or do you know?
Well, we've gone through this, and I can't recall a specific number because I don't think we actually counted them up. We just kind of walked through and looked at individual locations. What we've done is we've identified areas where there are driveways that are no longer in service. They exist. They've been somewhat paved over in previous ITD paving projects just to keep drainage from flowing into the parking lots. But the use of the private parcels behind those driveway approaches has changed to the point that the driveways are not used at all. So those are the ones that we would identify as the priorities to take them out. Obviously, we've got to talk to property owners as part of the process when we get there. There are some that we've looked at that said, well, it's a little hard to tell. We think potentially they could come out because they have alternative driveways that enter their parcels. They may have 3 or 4 in a given parcel, so maybe we can reduce the number. So the idea here was that where we could, we would take out either unused or underused driveways as long as there's still reasonable access to those parcels by other means.
The reason I ask that is we, in the past, up in my neighborhood, we had a large discussion here on the council about curb cuts and whether there were any lots that had more than, say, 1 curb cut. And the people whose property had 2 curb cuts didn't want to give them up. And some of the people that only had 1 wanted another one. And I guess my question is, you answered part of it. You'll deal with each one of the individual property owners individually and say, okay, this is where we are, what do you think? Which I'm always in favor of. Let's get the people that are directly involved, also directly involved in the, and then the next thing is if it becomes that the curb cut goes made level, no more curb cut, just sidewalk. Is that the end of the story, or could in the future that go back to the way it was with the curb cut?
Well, it's a little interesting when you're dealing with state highways, because typically once curb cuts go away, the state tends not to want to see them return unless there's no other alternative. If they're there, then they can always argue that they should be preserved. So that is part of the discussion and part of what we'd have to educate folks about in looking at individual curb cuts. As an example, one that's not directly affected by the grant, but just because it's here on the map, the new cafe going in here, there's a curb cut located right here, or there was, and very close proximity to the intersection. It was one of two driveway approaches that came in and out of the gas station. Working with the owner and with ITD, with the new construction going here, that curb cut has gone away and will not be replaced. So they will continue to have access off of the one here and then the one on the Jackson Street side. Both of those are removed as much as possible from the intersection and all the interactions that occur there. So that's the kind of discussion that we would have with each property owner as we move along. Are there opportunities to take out underused or not used at all driveways, as long as there's alternatives access for them?
If you go further to the west, down to where Archer Photography is,
Which happens to be right here, if I'm looking at the right one. I think
you got to go further that way.
I just moved over one.
That's it. Oh,
That's Archer. So Archer
Anyway,
has multiples here.
That was an old service station.
Yes.
So it had very large curb cut back in the day when that was necessary, and also across the street at that Mini Mart also has a large
That's the next one. Right.
curb cut.
Diagonally across from Archer.
Right, so Archer has access off of the west side of the property. It has, I believe, two curb cuts in here, and then even access off the alley, if I recall. So that's one we would look at.
That's what
Can
you're
we
gonna be
reduce
looking
the
at, all
number? Right, size and number in that case. So this is the next block to the west, so Almond to Asbury. Again, the same concept here. You see the somewhat magenta color. That would be new sidewalk through all those areas. This walk is in good condition, so we'd leave it. And then new lights in the blue, and then using city funds, replacement of the red lights as part of the overall project. Continuing on to the west, Asbury Street, then this is the mini mart I think you were just referring to?
That's the mini.
Yeah, that's the one, Jens. And so, yeah, they've got a couple here as well, same kind of thing. Perhaps, and you can see here where they're parking in front of one of them. So that's one that's very close to the intersection. It's one we'd prefer that not be there.
Well, they got one on the side, too, that goes up.
There's one here as well.
As well.
Yes. Right. So, again, three into the parking lot, one of which obviously is not used because they're parking in front of it. A pretty easy call for that one to come out. But those discussions would have to happen.
Les, a question while you're, if I may, while you're on that picture. I presume the red rectangles are handicap ramps?
The ADA ramps, yes. Yes, where they don't currently exist.
You're not showing them on the south side of the street. Are they already in existence? Or?
Yeah, ITD did a lot of these about 4 or 5 years ago.
Are they the old style, or are they the ones that have to be put in this week?
They, as far as I know, they're still current. I don't think it's changed in the time since they've replaced that set. So those I believe are still good.
So the entire length of the two phases of the project would have handicap cuts,
up to
ramps, for the length of the project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the sidewalk work. Everywhere we need to do sidewalk, they would be updated as well. So phase 2 would then pick up essentially at that same alley and work your way over, short of the Llewellyn intersection. It's really actually closer to this alley that swings north here before you get to Llewellyn. And just zooming in again, curb ramps, new lights in blue, sidewalk, north side, south side, really all the way down through here, an existing light there. And these ramps were done by ITD during that last ramp project that they undertook. And then just finishing here, originally we looked at coming up in this area, but part of the challenge is that the project working with the highway, what do you do out here? And so, we're not going to be building anything out there. The route is over here, and this sidewalk's actually in decent shape through here, and this is fairly new up to this point. So we felt it was probably appropriate just to terminate it at this stage as far as this particular project. Someday this intersection may reconfigure, and then we'd see some changes in that area as well.
Well, effectively, that's where the money ran out.
If you consider the overall size,
400,000 a phase.
yeah, what we're looking at right now is, as Elisa mentioned, a total of about 805,000. We've refined that number a bit since we put the CCSR in last week at 800.
Yeah, and that's what the packet says, 800.
Was 800 and approximately 800, but we knew we were still developing numbers as we went. As of today, we're looking at 805. As Elisa mentioned, the Phase 1, the larger of the two, so the easterly phase, 477,000, and then the westerly Phase 2 at 328,000. That particular split had to do somewhat with the geometry of what's out there, but also had to do with the number of accidents that were occurring within the corridor. More accidents on the east end, and so a higher project cost is offset by greater safety improvements due to the volume of accidents. So making Phase 1 larger still gave us a really high cost-benefit ratio, even though the price was higher, because there were more accidents to resolve, if that makes sense. So that shifted that phase line a little bit westerly to then balance them in terms of the cost-benefit ratio a little bit better. So that's the scope of the project, and if you have further questions, we'll
Jim,
answer them for you.
I got a couple questions for you, Les. The lighting that has to be replaced in Phase 1, do you know how much that would cost, roughly?
I do not know right offhand. I think we were in the neighborhood of about 8 or so lights, and generally we use about $8,000 per light, but that includes foundation work and some of the wiring. We would be running wiring right by these lights as part of the grant-funded work, so really it's probably just the base and the light and the hookup itself. So that number is, perhaps a little lower than that, 8,000 per.
The wiring's already there. It would just be
right. You'd be just connecting those.
The new fixture that would have to be connected to it. Right. And then how many lights are in Phase 2?
Well, I was thinking actually overall. I would have to count them up, frankly, to know the total.
If it's the same amount, you're looking at roughly $100,000 to replace the lights that are already there.
Yeah, I think
so they'd all match.
6. I think we've got roughly 6 in the first phase, if I'm catching them all. And let's see, I believe 6 there, and Phase 2 looks like it has another 3 or 4. Yeah, I don't know if we would do this one down here because it's outside the scope, so probably 3 there. So about 9 altogether. So just say roughly 80,000 for all of them.
Walter?
Yeah, considering.
You have a fund for this.
Say it again. We have a what?
A fund.
A fund for this type of work. Yes,
Yeah,
some of the
streetlight work because of the streetlight fee that accumulates.
Right. Yeah, some of the streetlight fee does go into the capital program for streetlight replacements. And yes, and Lisa just reminded me that the URA is also, as indicated in the packet, committed so far to about $15,000 in funds towards this effort, and will be considering whether or not they could participate at a higher level. Part of that discussion has been that how we do address the additional costs for the lights, and that would be potentially a good area for the URA to participate at a higher level if they choose to do so. Lacking that, then we would be looking to the streetlight fund to pay for those additional lights.
Another question.
I'm prepared to make a motion, but I want to make sure that the motion hasn't changed as presented in the packet because of the change into 2 phases.
Actually, I think it was worded such that we would make applications, plural, totaling
funding
requests, plural, for up to
805,000 is the overall entire thing, right?
Right. If
Yes.
both projects
yeah,
approved.
Correct.
Combined
So
project
that's what the motion
costs.
would be.
I'll make the motion, and Les can say, don't anybody second that because it's not worded right. I make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we approve submittal of funding request to FY19 Local Highway Safety Improvement Program with estimated combined project cost of approximately $805,000 for pedestrian safety improvements on the 3rd Street corridor from Jackson Street to the area of Llewellyn Street.
I'll second that.
Does that sound good to you, Les?
Sounds great.
Okay. We have a motion by Walter and a second by John to approve a submittal of funding request for FY19 local highway safety improvement program with an estimated combined project cost of approximately $805,000 for pedestrian safety improvements on the 3rd Street corridor from Jackson Street to Llewellyn Street. Start the roll, John.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much, Lisa and Les. Thank you. With that, that takes us to the end of our meeting. Well, we'll do reports. Now let's start with you, Jim.
Okay, well, let's see, Public Works Finance, everything that was discussed at that meeting last week is on the agenda, so we've pretty much covered that. I've been to all of my new commission assignments. Arts Commission is working diligently on Art Walk 2017 that will occur on June 16th. If you're putting that on your calendar. That was the crux of their first meeting. The Farmers Market Commission met last week as well, and the crux of their discussion was based on changes in the possible fee structure for this coming year, and they're using Mr. Peterson's study as well as input from the vendors to try and decide on what they're going to do and whether it's going to be more than 5% or not for this market season. And I also attended the Palouse Knowledge Corridor last week, and what's going on there is they're working on the Be the Entrepreneur Boot Camp again for this year to try and see if we can get new businesses to spin off from both universities and locate in the Moscow-Pullman area. And that's what I have.
Okay, all right.
Nice. We saw what the Tree Commission had to say tonight, so that was taken care of. Human Rights Commission met, re-elected Ken Fonce as their chairman, begged for more applications for people in TV land. There's 1 college seat and 3 regular seats open on that commission. The Martin Luther King breakfast is coming up this Saturday for those who would like to attend that out at the junior high, 9 o'clock in the morning. URA is coming up on Thursday, and CETA is also coming up on Thursday. So that's what I have.
Okay, Walter.
I met with my new commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, on Wednesday the 11th, and the main item to report there is they elected Wendy McClure the chair again for this calendar year. Vice chair will be Rob Parrish, and the second vice chair, they have 2 vice chairs, a second vice chair, interestingly, will be Joel Hamilton, who's probably done it about 6 times before.
At least. Okay. Catherine.
I attended the board meeting for the Moscow Volunteer Fire Department, and it was really interesting. I'm really glad that we've gotten to do the change. And they were closing out their books for the year. They said they're still fundraising, and so far they're 84% to where they want to be. They are at $93,000, and they have some upcoming fundraisers because they've got the crab feed coming up, and then they're also planning the 125-year anniversary, I think, of that station, or and so that's kind of in the works for them. And then the other thing that they were excited about was their T-shirts, which the city funds, and so I brought a picture for y'all to have. They're so excited because it looks like all the people, and it says Moscow Volunteer Fire Department. It has their insignia on it, and they had a conversation about that, and they're very proud to be able to do that, and so are we. So I really enjoyed it. I didn't get to stay for the other meeting after, but I will next time. And then I had the facilities meeting for 1912, and you all saw that with the re-roof. But I thought it was important to point out that there's also fundraising, and this year they raised over $118,000. And at the start of this year's, $1,150 has been raised. And that was just 4 different donations. That was really kind of neat. Another cool thing was they filmed The Last Champion at the 1912 up on the 3rd floor. And so Jen had some pretty good stories about that. So the 1912 building will be in the movie. And the next winter market's February 8th, and if you want a tour of the floors, please go there. They're on the hour, 11 noon and 1 p.m. Please do that, and you can see all the things that are being done. And the main thing is it'll be 10 years for Jen, February 1st, that she's been part of the HAI and working with the 1912. So, you know, kudos to her and all that kind of stuff for all that she's done there. So that was really neat. And then Becky Crouch and I met with the bike share of the Palouse, and there was a conference call with Zagster. And Jim, did you go to that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, and so she and I haven't had a chance to follow up, but I know they had a good call with him and got a lot of information. It'd be really cool if Zagster was interested in coming to town. It costs $1,800 for a bike turnkey operation, and for 2 years you have to sponsor it. And they look for sponsors and stuff. But I think it's great that you've got the bike share coming up tomorrow.
I'll talk about that here in a few minutes.
That's cool. So anyway, I've enjoyed the new commission, so I'm glad we were able to switch.
Good. Gina.
I am currently, it might be over with by now, I'm missing my first meeting of the Sustainable Environment Commission because we moved our council because of the holiday. They gave me a pass, though. They were nice about it. So I look forward to that meeting next month. And I did attend the candidate meet and greet last week for the PBAC group. They're hiring a new executive director. And so I had some hors d'oeuvres and got to meet the two candidates. I will attend the regular meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock.
John.
Urban Renewal met on the 5th of January, and election of officers, the officers stayed the same. And then Bill Belknap gave a real good report on the strategic plan review for the Urban Renewal Agency. He identified all of the issues that we're going to be dealing with, or we think we're going to be dealing with, and laid out a little bit of a roadmap so that we know which direction hopefully we're going all of the time. Not that it can't change if it needs to, but at least we're going to be going along that way. And then the Moscow Fair and Affordable Housing Commission met also on January 5th, and I had my information wrong. I thought the meeting started at 7. It started at 5:30, so when I got there at 6:45, they were about done. However, after talking to them, they spent some time trying to identify a Saturday at the farmers market. They've got some questions for the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust, and they appointed a chairperson for 2017, I think the same one as they had last year. And if I said any more about that, it would be pure conjecture. So that is my report.
One last thing. Sorry, last thing. We had a Transportation Commission meeting, and Les presented very well to the group, and the Tree Commission presented there too. So it's really great how the commissions you all are making the rounds to catch them up on everything. So that was really good.
Okay, well, just a couple of things. Tomorrow we got biking on the Palouse, which will be at the Best Western, starts at 7:30. There's going to be 4 presenters there. Les will be part of that. Right off the bat, him and Tyler Palmer. But anyway, that's going to be kind of exciting to see that. That'll be kind of fun. And that quarterly breakfast, I'll have folks from City of Pullman, Whitman County commissioners, as well as our commissioners here and our town, university, so on and so forth. So there should be a bunch of us out there. And then, as Art had spoke about, Martin Luther King breakfast is the 21st, and I'm looking forward to that. That Saturday we'll have a presentation as always, and so it'll be kind of a fun thing. It has been every year. I wanted to mention about next week, Association Idaho Cities. There's going to be a bunch of us down there. Not everybody's going to be there, but it'll be a bunch of us down there throughout part of the week, and some folks all week. And then I just wanted to remind the public that the Smithsonian Water Systems and Sustainability, it will be coming to an end here pretty soon. For those folks out there who want to see it, they got to get in here within the next week because it will be wrapping up. With that, Gary, do you have something you want to report?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to mention again the clearing of storm drains and helping out where you can. We don't want to have pooling water if we can help it, so anybody who can help out, if you know where a storm drain is, clear it, and we'll try to get that water to the creek. Wanted to talk a little bit about the legislature is back in session. One of the reasons we're traveling to Boise next week, and I wanted to mention that there was an article in the paper regarding freshman Senator Dan Foreman, who had a few things that he intends to sponsor in the legislature this year, particularly of interest to the city. And I received a call from Tom Lamar, Latah County Commissioner, about this last Friday, that Senator Foreman is considering proposing legislation that would limit a city or a county's right to access foregone taxes. So if the city council, as it did in this last budgetary session, took 1% of a tax increase rather than the statutorily allowed 3%, under current law, we're allowed to essentially bank that, and should the council wish to access it at another time, it's considered taxes authorized but not taken. So it gives the city flexibility. Also encourages the council to be as conservative as they need to be and not lose that taxing capability should it become necessary later. Apparently, Senator Foreman, I've not contacted him yet, but apparently he is considering introducing legislation that would essentially wipe out the ability of local government to go back and access those foregone taxes. The reason I bring this up is it's very early in the legislative session. Latah County indicated that they are considering preparing a letter to Senator Foreman indicating the county's position on that legislation. This isn't the first time legislation like this has been discussed. It has been in previous years. So I'd like to plumb the council's desire, if you'd like me to draft a letter for the mayor's consideration, indicating that the city has a similar concern about essentially limiting the ability to access those taxes authorized but not taken.
Discussion.
A question for Gary, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Has the good senator inquired of the largest city in his district what we thought about it before he put this forward?
Hell no.
I've received no communication from Senator Foreman, and I've not reached out to him yet. Usually the first time that city representatives access the legislature is during the AIC conference. But I think it's if the mayor would like, and if the council's okay with it, I would certainly be happy to help the mayor draft a letter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so.
Sound good?
Do
You
it.
all agree on it? Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gary. I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session per Idaho Code 74-206, 1C and 1F, and the meeting will not reconvene after.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? This meeting is 8:32. Thank you, everybody.